The wooden cart lurched sideways the exact second Adama Diallo stepped out of her hired car at the old market. A sack split open. Onions rolled across the mud. Traders shouted. A bent old man stumbled forward under the weight of another man's goods, while a younger vendor barked, "Move faster, old fool, or I'll cut your pay again." Adama froze. Because the man wiping sweat from his lined face, the man gripping the rope with shaking hands, the man being cursed like he was worth less than the dust beneath the cart wheels, was Baba Sani, her father, the proud man she had sent money to for 8 years. And when he lifted one trembling hand and begged, "Please, my family is waiting for this money," something inside her broke. "Before we go on, tell me if you came home rich and found your father suffering in silence while the family lived off his pain. What would you do first? And where are you watching from today?" Drop your country and local time in the comments. If stories filled with truth, justice, and healing move you, subscribe and stay with us. Adama did not call out to him. She wanted to. The cry rose to her throat with such force that it almost tore free. But years in boardrooms, years of learning, when silence revealed more than anger, held her still. She remained half-hidden beside the hired car, while the market roared around her like a living storm. Baba Sani bent again. Another sack was shoved onto his shoulder. The cloth of his faded shirt darkened with sweat. His back, once broad and unbreakable in Adama's memory, now looked bowed by more than age. Every few steps his knees seemed to hesitate, as if they were asking permission to keep going. The young vendor beside him did not see a father. He did not see an old man. He saw only cheap labor. "Careful!" The vendor snapped when Baba Sani stumbled against a crate of tomatoes. "If you ruin anything, I will take it from your pay." Baba Sani lowered his head and murmured, "I said I am sorry." Adama's fingers curled so tightly around her bag that her nails pressed crescents into her palm. 8 years. For 8 years she had sent money home without fail, more when she could, double on holidays. Extra during the rainy season, enough to repair the roof, enough to ease old age, enough to make sure her father would never have to bow before anyone again. And yet here he was apologizing for being too slow while carrying another man's burden. A woman selling dried fish noticed Adama staring and followed her gaze. "That old man," she said casually. "He works every day, before sunrise sometimes." Adama turned to her. "Every day?" The woman shrugged. "If there is work?" Adama forced her voice into calm. "Does he have no family to help him?" The woman gave a short laugh that held no joy. "Family. He says he works for them." Then she moved on to her next customer, as if she had spoken of the weather. For Adama, the world narrowed. "Works for them, not with them, not helped by them, for them." Her driver, a quiet local man named Isa, stepped closer. "Madam," he said softly, "should I go speak to him?" "No." The answer came too quickly. She steadied herself. "No, not yet." Isa studied her face in the rearview mirror's reflection from the open door and understood enough not to ask more. Adama watched until Baba Sani finished the delivery. The vendor tossed a few notes into his hand without even counting in front of him. Her father folded the money carefully, almost reverently, and slipped it into an inner pocket as though it were something fragile and precious. Then he picked up the rope of the empty cart and began walking away from the noisy center of the market. Adama followed. "Adama!" She told Isa to drive slowly and keep enough distance not to be noticed. The market gave way to narrower streets where potholes held stale water and children ran in school uniforms already grayed by dust. The city she had left behind had changed and not changed. New buildings rose here and there like proud interruptions, but hunger still clung to the edges of everything. Baba Sani walked with the slow determination of a man who had trained himself not to waste energy. He stopped once at a roadside stall and bought something wrapped in old newspaper. Bread, Adama thought at first, but when he moved again, she saw from the careful way he held it that it was medicine. Her breath tightened. He was sick, or someone at home was. The road bent toward the neighborhood where she had grown up. Her stomach dropped. The jacaranda tree that used to lean over the first corner was gone. The tailor shop with the blue shutters was now a mobile money kiosk. The old tea stand still stood near the crossroads, though smaller than she remembered. Even memory seemed poorer here. At last, Babasani turned into the lane leading to the family house. "Stop here," Adama whispered. Issa pulled over beneath a neem tree. From there, she could see the house through the rusted gate. At first glance, it looked better than it had years ago. The outer walls had been repainted in bright cream. A new metal roof gleamed in the afternoon light. The gate, though old, had been patched and painted black. Flower pots lined the front veranda in neat rows. To a stranger, it would have looked like a house cared for by a family of modest comfort. But Adama had grown up in that house. She knew how to read what stood behind surfaces. The paint on the front walls stopped abruptly at the side passage. The windows at the left had curtains, fresh, expensive curtains. The window near the back, the one that used to be her father's room, had no curtain at all. One of the side walls remained cracked beneath its thin layer of paint. And near the water drum, she noticed a pile of broken tiles and rotting timber hidden just out of view like evidence. The house had only been dressed from the front. Babasani entered through the gate with a tired slowness that broke her heart more than any dramatic collapse could have. Before he reached the door, it flew open. Mama Kemi stepped out first. She looked well-fed, well-dressed, and fully alive in the way of people whose comfort has been built by other hands. Gold earrings flashed at her ears. Her wrapper was new. Her face, rounder than Adama remembered, tightened the instant she saw Babasani approaching without haste. "You are late," she said. No greeting, no concern, no glance at the tremor in his hands. "There was a delay at the market," he said quietly. Tunde emerged behind her, wearing a pressed football jersey and expensive sandals. He looked stronger, heavier, and lazier than the restless boy Adama remembered. He frowned at Babasani's pocket. "You got paid?" he asked. Babasani hesitated only a fraction. "Some of it." "Give it to Mama," Tunde said. Adama felt something cold slide through her chest. Halima appeared last. She was older now, nearly a young woman, slim and beautiful in a careful, uncertain way. Her eyes darted first to Babasani's face, then to the folded newspaper in his hand. "Your medicine," she whispered. Mama Kemi shot her a look so sharp that Halima went silent at once. Only then did Babasani bring out the crumpled notes. He separated one note from the rest and held on to it. Mama Kemi's gaze hardened. "All of it." He glanced at the newspaper parcel. "I need to pay for this." "For what?" He did not answer. Tunde stepped down from the veranda and snatched the folded money from his hand. Babasani did not resist. He only kept hold of the medicine. Mama Kemi turned away at once, already counting. "This cannot even cover the electricity and food. Tomorrow you must stay longer." His voice was so soft, Adama almost missed it. "My back is not as strong." "Then pray for strength," Mama Kemi replied. "Or do you want this family to starve?" Family. The word struck Adama like an insult. She stared at the house again, and now the details sharpened cruelly. Tunde's sandals, Mama Kemi's bracelets, the polished tray visible through the open door, the television light flickering inside. Halima's dress was plain, but not worn through. Nobody here looked like they were starving. Only her father did. Babasani moved toward the side of the house instead of entering through the front. Halima made a tiny movement as if she wanted to follow him, but Tunde barked at her to bring water inside. She obeyed. Adama slipped from the car and moved quietly along the outer wall until she reached the broken section of fence near the back. Through it, she saw Babasani open the old storage room. Storage room? Not his bedroom, not the room he had once shared with dignity and order. A storage room. He stepped inside. A narrow cot stood against the wall. Beside it sat a plastic basin, a cracked cup, and a small wooden stool. One shelf held folded clothes, so few they could not fill half the space. On another sat pills, ointment, and an old Bible with its corners worn white. That was when Adama understood the full obscenity of it. The house had not been repaired for him. It had been rearranged around his humiliation. Out front, the family displayed respectability. In the back, the man who paid for it lived like an afterthought. Adama's eyes burned, but her tears did not fall. Not yet. Grief was there. So was guilt. But something harder was rising through both, something sharp, disciplined, merciless. She had arrived planning to surprise her family. Now she knew she had come home to an ambush built over years, and she would not make the mistake of showing her hand too soon. From inside the storage room, Baba Sani sat on the edge of the cot and let out one long, shaking breath, the kind a person releases only when no one is watching. But someone was watching. His daughter stood in the shadows beyond the broken fence, her heart splitting open in silence as the first true shape of betrayal emerged before her eyes. Adama did not sleep that night. She checked into a small business hotel on the other side of the city, under a shortened version of her name, and sat beside the window until dawn, staring at the blurred lights below. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same three images in merciless clarity. Baba Sani bent beneath the weight of another man's goods tunde, taking his money as if it were tribute, and that narrow cot in the storage room, where her father breathed like a man trying not to disturb even his own pain. By sunrise, grief had hardened into method. She called no one from her company except one trusted legal aid in Nairobi and told him she needed discreet background verification on old land records, bank routing trails, and archived property transfers linked to the Diallo family home. No police, no formal letters, not yet. She wanted facts before war. Then she changed clothes. Gone was the quiet elegance of a CEO traveling home. In its place, she chose a simple tailored blouse, dark trousers, flat shoes, and a plain headscarf that softened the sharp recognition her face might invite. She left off jewelry. She wore no perfume. When she looked into the mirror, she saw not Adama Diallo, the celebrated executive, but a serious woman with money, purpose, and questions, exactly the kind of person who might come to a market looking for suppliers. By mid-morning, she was back near the old quarter. The market was fully awake now, louder, hotter, more ruthless. Motorbikes grazed past baskets of kasser. Women called prices over pyramids of oranges and dried pepper. Men argued over transport fees. The smell of diesel fish dust, sweat, and spice hung over everything like a rough second sky. Adama moved slowly, letting herself be seen but not noticed. She asked about grain transport, bulk produce, delivery reliability. She listened more than she spoke. Within half an hour, she learned what public truth always sounds like in poor communities: incomplete, inconsistent, and painfully close to the bone. The old man, one porter said when she casually mentioned Baba Sani. He is honest. Too honest, another muttered. He never steals weight, said a third. Never cheats on count. A woman selling smoked catfish clicked her tongue. That is why men use him. Used him. Not valued, not respected. Adama thanked them and kept moving until she saw him near the back row of the loading area, where transport men gathered around battered handcarts and rope-tied bundles. Today, Baba Sani was not hauling. He was crouched beside a cracked wooden cart, trying to repair one wheel with a bent nail and an old strip of rubber. Even from a distance, she could see the stiffness in the way he lowered himself. The careful favoring of one side, the pauses too slight for strangers to pity and too familiar for loved ones to ignore. Loved ones. The word tasted bitter. She approached with measured steps and stopped near enough for her shadow to fall across the cart. "Excuse me," she said in English, first polished and neutral. "Are you Baba Sani Diallo?" He looked up. For one terrible second, Adama feared he would know her instantly, not because her face had not changed, but because fathers were supposed to know. But he only blinked against the sun and rose slowly, one hand gripping the side of the cart for support. "Yes," he said. "I am Sani." His eyes moved over her clothes, her posture, the quality she could not fully hide. A respectful caution entered his expression. "I was told," Adama said, forcing her pulse to stay even, "that you know many of the traders here and understand transport routes better than most. I'm exploring local sourcing for a regional distribution project." He straightened a little despite his fatigue. Work gave him posture. Responsibility gave him shape. "I know some routes," he said. "What kind of goods produce first? Dry goods later, possibly household staples." She glanced at the cart. "But only if I can trust the people I work with." At that, something almost sad flickered across his face. "Trust is expensive these days." The answer hit her harder than it should have. She kept her tone businesslike. "And are you expensive?" A faint smile touched one corner of his mouth. Not flirtation, not humor for show, just a man remembering for a second what it felt like to be spoken to like he still possessed dignity. "No," he said, "but I am reliable." Adama looked at his hands. Calloused, swollen at the joints, the nails worn blunt. "How long have you been doing this?" "A few years. A lie by omission, perhaps. Or maybe humility speaking in shortened form." "You work alone?" He hesitated. "Mostly. Do you own the cart?" "No." "Then why repair it yourself?" He answered without self-pity. "Because if I return it broken, I may not get work tomorrow." The noise of the market blurred around Adama. She felt again that violent urge to say, "Baba, stop. It's me. You never have to do this again." But she swallowed it. Too soon, she reminded herself. Too soon, and the liars would lock every door before she reached the truth, so she nodded toward a tea stand shaded by patched canvas. "Can I buy you tea while we talk business?" His first instinct was to refuse. She saw it in the brief tightening of his jaw, the pride that still rose to defend itself, even when exhausted. "I do not take charity," he said. "It isn't charity," Adama replied. "It's negotiation." That made him accept. They sat on low stools near the tea stand, half-turned from the main path. A boy brought sweet black tea in cloudy glasses. Baba Sani held his with both hands, perhaps for warmth, perhaps because one hand alone trembled too much. Adama asked about suppliers. He gave careful, practical answers. Which farmers were honest in harvest season? Which middlemen added false weight? Which roads flooded first in the rains? Which transporters drank? Which ones paid workers late? His knowledge was precise, local, earned by labor rather than theory. Listening to him, Adama felt the old pride rising under the pain. This was not a broken man. This was a capable one made invisible. Then she shifted slightly. "And your family?" she asked as if idly. "Would this kind of work interest them too?" He looked down into his tea. "My family has enough burdens." The answer was too gentle to be casual. "Do they help you?" He gave a small shrug. "Families help each other in different ways." "Not yes. Not no. A shield." Adama lowered her voice. "Forgive me, but I was told you are not well. Yet you still work every day." At once his expression changed, not defensive for himself, but alert, almost protective. "Who told you that?" "So it is true." He set the glass down carefully. "I am still standing. You should not have to prove strength by suffering," Adama said. His gaze lifted to hers, then fully. and for the first time, something dangerous passed between them. Recognition not of identity, but of moral language. He heard in her words the outline of someone who would not excuse cruelty as culture or endurance as destiny. Still, he only said, "There are mouths at home." The sentence was simple, but Adama heard the entire architecture of his silence inside it. She pressed once more. "Your children." A softness entered his face that nearly broke her. "Yes," he said. Then, after the tiniest pause, "My children." Adama looked away before her own face betrayed her. He still claimed them all, even now, even after the storage room, even after the market, even after being stripped to function. She forced herself back into role. "Would you consider working for me part-time? Advising only. No heavy lifting." He almost smiled again, but this time there was weariness in it. "Madam, people like you say such things kindly. Then later they discover they need younger men. I hire character before muscle. That is rare. I value rare things." He was quiet for a moment. Around them sellers shouted and children laughed, and a goat broke loose from a tether to general insult. Ordinary life moved on while Adama sat across from her father pretending to be a stranger. At last he said, "If the work is honest, I can try." The humility of that answer cut her more deeply than any complaint could have. Before she could reply, a voice called from behind her. "Babasani." An older woman in a faded green wrapper approached, carrying a basket of okra on her hip. Her back was bent, but her eyes were sharp. The moment she saw Adama, she slowed. She looked from Babasani to Adama, and then back again. Something old and searching stirred in her face. "Your tea is getting cold," she told Babasani. Though his glass was nearly empty, he rose slightly in greeting. "Mama Nafi." Mama Nafi. Adama knew that name. The neighbor who used to borrow salt from her mother. The woman who had once smacked Tunda with a sandal for throwing stones at chickens. Time had reduced and toughened her, but it had not erased her. Mama Nafi's eyes settled on Adama, one heartbeat too long. "Have we met?" she asked quietly. Adama kept her breathing steady. "I don't think so, Mama." "No," the old woman said. "Perhaps not." But she did not sound convinced. Babasani excused himself to take a loading call from a tomato trader. As soon as he moved away, Mama Nafi sat heavily in his place without invitation. "You speak like someone educated," she murmured, "and you look at that man like your heart is drowning." Adama felt the ground tilt. Mama Nafi leaned closer, voice lower now. "Who are you really?" For the first time since returning home, Adama understood that the truth might not stay hidden as long as she intended, and perhaps that was not entirely a bad thing. Adama did not answer Mama Nafi immediately. The old woman's eyes were too clear, too knowing for a careless lie. Around them, the market still thundered with movement, men calling waits, women haggling over peppers, metal bowls, clanging motorbikes, coughing dust into the heat. But inside that small pocket of shade by the tea stall, everything seemed to narrow to one question. "Who are you really?" Adama folded her hands in her lap to keep them still. "Someone who has reason to care," she said at last. Mama Nafi snorted softly, unimpressed. "That is not an answer." "No," Adama admitted. "It is the safest one I can give right now." The old woman studied her face with the slow patience of someone who had lived long enough to know when truth was circling but not ready to land. Then she gave one short nod. "Good. Safe is better than foolish." She shifted on the stool and glanced toward Babasani, who was now helping a trader count cassava sacks, though he was clearly in pain. "You came back and found something ugly," Mama Nafi said. It was not a question. Adama let out a breath. "How long has he been working like this?" Mama Nafi's mouth thinned. "Longer than he should have. Shorter than the cruelty deserves." Please. Adama leaned closer. Tell me what you know. Mama Nafi kept watching Baba Sani as she spoke, as if respect required that she not look directly at the shame she was describing. At first it was not like this, she said. At first after you left, things looked normal enough. Money came into that house. Repairs began. New things appeared. Your father still walked with his head up. He said his daughter was doing well. He was proud, very proud. Adama felt her throat tighten. Then slowly Mama Nafi continued. He began to shrink inside that house. Not in body first, in voice, in place. He stopped sitting out front in the evenings, stopped speaking in decisions, stopped laughing where people could hear him. Because of Mama Kemi. The old woman gave her a dry look. Do snakes stop being snakes because no one names them? Adama almost smiled despite the ache in her chest. Mama Kemi is clever, Mama Nafi went on. Not clever in the way of building something. Clever in the way of taking what already exists and making others think it belongs to her. She learned very quickly where the money came from, and after that, every kindness in that house turned into a performance. Adama's voice dropped. Did Baba Sani know? He knew enough to suffer, not enough to fight at first. That answer lodged like a blade. Before Adama could ask more, Baba Sani turned from the tomato trader and started walking back toward them. Mama Nafi rose at once with surprising speed for her age. Come by my yard after sunset, she said under her breath. Do not come through the front road. Use the back path by the old well. Then louder with the bright, false casualness of market speech. Tell your buyer in Kano that my okra is better than whatever he is eating there. Adama nodded as if amused. I will. By the time Baba Sani returned, Mama Nafi was already moving away. She still thinks she can frighten customers into buying from her, he said, settling back onto the stool. Adama looked after the old woman's retreating figure. Maybe she frightens them into honesty. For the briefest second, something like warmth touched his tired face. That she does. They spoke for another 15 minutes, but Adama's mind was already splitting in two, one half staying present, asking calm questions about delivery routes and storage costs. The other racing ahead toward dusk, toward hidden paths, toward the possibility that the story she had uncovered was only the outer skin of something darker. When they parted, she gave Baba Sani a card bearing the name of a regional supply consultant she had used as a cover. If I decide to move ahead, someone will contact you, she said. He accepted the card carefully, as though such things still meant doors could open instead of close. Thank you, he said. The words were ordinary, but Adama heard the buried humility beneath them, and it nearly undid her. She left the market before he could see her eyes. The rest of the afternoon became a quiet hunt. Back at the hotel, Adama spread papers across the desk and began building a map of absence. Bank confirmations, archived email copies from her cloud storage, courier receipts from years ago, screenshots of unanswered messages. She made columns, dates, and questions the way she would for an acquisition gone suspiciously wrong. The pattern emerged with horrifying elegance. For the first 2 years after she left, communication had been thin but believable. Baba Sani had never been a man of long messages. Money transfers went to the same family account. Replies when they came were brief, grateful, and written in the careful English he preferred. Then something changed. The language of the messages shifted. The spelling grew inconsistent in odd places and overly formal in others. Requests for money became more frequent, always tied to emergencies. Roof damage medicine, school fees, food shortages, church contributions, burial obligations, hospital debts. Some excuses contradicted each other across months. One year Baba Sani was supposedly too ill to work. The next he was said to be strong but stubborn and refusing treatment. On 3 separate occasions Adama had sent extra funds for repairs to the back room where he slept. Now she knew he had been sleeping in a storage room. The repairs had either never happened or had been diverted elsewhere. Her phone buzzed. It was her legal aid. "I have preliminary findings," he said without preamble. "The family property has no completed transfer yet, but there were 2 attempts to initiate alteration of beneficial ownership over the last 18 months. Adama sat straighter. By whom? One application names Kemi Afolayan Diallo as spouse with supporting household authority. Another lists Tunde Afolayan as delegated son and caretaker. Both are incomplete. Both include irregularities. What kind of irregularities? A witness signature that appears copied across 2 documents. Inconsistent ID numbers. One page references a power of attorney instrument that does not appear in the registry. Forgery. Adama closed her eyes for 1 second. "Can they still complete it?" she asked. "If no one challenges and the right local clerk is bribed." "Possibly. But the file is messy." Messy. That was the bureaucratic word. The human word was theft. After the call ended, Adama opened her old email archive and searched for one phrase she remembered clearly. Years ago, after her first major promotion, she had sent Baba Sani a message promising to buy back the adjoining strip of land he had always wanted for a bigger storehouse. He had replied with unusual warmth, writing, "A home grows best when truth sits at the doorway." It had become one of her private sayings. She searched the phrase. Nothing. No later message from him ever used language remotely like it again. That was when she stopped thinking in suspicion and began thinking in proof. Someone had taken over the voice of her father long ago. After sunset, Adama changed again. Plain dress sandals, scarf wrapped low, and left through the hotel's side entrance. Isa drove her to the old quarter, but stopped 2 streets away as instructed. The back path by the old well was narrower than she remembered, half swallowed by weeds and broken bricks. Frogs croaked in standing water. Laundry lines hung like tired flags between leaning walls. Mama Nafi's yard sat behind a crooked wooden gate patched with wire. A single bulb glowed near the doorway. When Adama entered, the old woman was seated on a stool shelling beans into a metal basin. "You came," Mama Nafi said. "You asked me to. I ask many things. Not everyone listens." She pointed to another stool. Adama sat. For a while the only sound was the dry clicking of beans hitting metal. Then Mama Nafi said, "Your father cried only once where I could hear him." Adama went still. It was the year after the money began to change that house. "He came to borrow my phone because his had stopped working." That is what he said. Her mouth twisted. "He stood in my yard and tried to call you. The number would not connect. Or perhaps someone had already changed what he carried. I do not know. But after the 3rd attempt, he sat on that stone there and put his hand over his mouth like a child trying not to wake the dead." Adama's eyes burned. "Why didn't he tell anyone?" Mama Nafi looked at her sharply. "Tell them what?" "That his wife was taking his dignity 1 cup at a time, that the daughter he loved had become a ghost behind money and silence. Men like your father are not trained to confess hunger of the soul. They endure until endurance becomes their prison." Adama stared down at her hands. "I sent enough," she whispered. "I thought I was helping." Mama Nafi's voice softened, but only slightly. "You did help. That is why greed gathered. Do not confuse your love with their sin." The words steadied her just enough to breathe. "Tell me about the letters Adama said." Mama Nafi gave a grim nod. "Ah, so you found that trail too." She rose slowly, went inside, and returned with an old biscuit tin. From it she drew 3 envelopes, yellowed at the edges and resealed badly. She placed them on Adama's lap. "I found these in the rubbish pile behind your house months ago. I kept them because something smelled wrong." Adama looked down. All 3 bore her name in Baba Sani's careful handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she opened the first. The letter was short. Babasani wrote that he had not received her last 2 calls. He worried that perhaps her work was too heavy. He did not ask for money. He only said Halima needed school books and that he would try to manage. At the bottom, in shaky ink, he had added, "If you can call me only when I am at the market. Things are easier there." Adama's vision blurred. She opened the second letter. This one was worse. Babasani wrote that he had signed papers he did not fully understand because Kemi said it was necessary to access medical care. He was no longer certain which things in the house still belonged to him. He apologized for the strange sentence immediately after writing it, as if ashamed of sounding weak. Then came the line that hollowed her out. "I do not want you to think I am begging. I only want you to know that silence in a house can be arranged by people other than God." Adama lowered the page to her lap. Mama Nafi did not interrupt. The third letter had never been finished. Ink trailed off halfway down the page. But the part that remained was enough. "If anything happens to me, do not trust the smiles in that house until you have looked behind the kitchen wall and under the metal box in the old grain room." Adama looked up sharply. "Behind the kitchen wall," she said. Mama Nafi nodded once. "Your father began hiding things. Receipts. Copies. I think he was frightened someone would take even his proof." For a moment, Adama could not speak. All this time, Babasani had not been entirely passive. He had been trying quietly, imperfectly, to leave a trail she had arrived just in time to follow. She folded the letters with reverence and slipped them back into the envelopes. "When was the last time you saw him write?" she asked. Mama Nafi's answer came low and hard. The weak Tunda came back from town with 2 men from the registry office. A chill moved through Adama's whole body, because now the shape of the danger was clear. This was no longer just a story of family selfishness. It was a planned stripping away of voice, of property, of proof, and soon, perhaps, of everything her father had left. And somewhere inside that house, hidden behind walls and metal boxes, lay the first pieces of evidence that could tear the whole lie open. Adama waited until the next afternoon to return to the house openly. She could have gone in that very night. She could have forced the gate, confronted Mama Kemi with the stolen letters in her hand, and demanded to know how a man who built that home with his own strength had been pushed into a storage room behind it. Rage invited that kind of drama. But rage, Adama knew, also warned the guilty. And she was no longer dealing with ordinary selfishness. She was dealing with people who had rehearsed their innocence for years. So she arrived in daylight, announced, polished, and smiling. Issa drove her to the front gate in a clean black sedan, borrowed through one of her regional offices. Adama wore a cream blouse, a long structured skirt, gold earrings, simple enough not to boast, yet expensive enough to unsettle, and the calm expression of a woman who had learned to enter rooms by making them rearrange around her. She carried one medium-sized suitcase, no more. A daughter coming home, a successful one, but not at first glance a dangerous one. The gate had barely creaked open before Mama Kemi's voice rang out. "Adama." There it was, the manufactured warmth drenched in surprise, half a second too late to be genuine. Mama Kemi hurried down the veranda steps, both arms opened wide, rapper bright face shining with the kind of smile that belonged in church photographs, and nowhere near the truth. Tunda came behind her, startled first, then rapidly cheerful, as he took in the car, the driver, the suitcase. Halima appeared in the doorway, and froze, one hand still clutching a dish towel. For one suspended moment, Adama let herself see them as they were seeing her. Money. Opportunity. Status. Perhaps even more than that danger not yet named. Mama Kemi embraced her with scented fabric and soft flesh and false affection. "Why did you not tell us you were coming? We would have prepared. We would have sent someone." Adama smiled gently. "I wanted to surprise you. That much at least was true." Tunda stepped forward and took her suitcase before she offered it. Big woman now, he said, with a laugh too loud for the size of the yard. You forgot us poor people. I remembered enough to come back, Adama replied. His grin flickered. Just a little. Good, she thought. Let them wonder. Then she looked past them, careful, casual searching. Baba Sani was standing near the side of the house, one hand resting against the wall, as if he had been on his way to or from the back room. He had changed clothes since the market. His shirt was clean but old. His face held the stunned stillness of a man who had been struck not by violence, but by hope, arriving too suddenly to trust. Adama's heart slammed once against her ribs. For a second, all her planning nearly failed. She wanted to go to him, to take both his hands to say, Baba, I know, I saw, I'm here now. But she walked toward him at a normal pace. Baba, she said softly, his lips parted. Adama. The word came out like a prayer pulled from rubble. He did not rush to her. He did not collapse. Baba Sani had too much dignity for public display even now. But when she embraced him, she felt the tremor he tried to hide. His shoulders were lighter than memory. His bones were nearer the surface. One arm came around her slowly, as if he feared she might vanish if he moved too fast. You did not tell us, he said when they parted. Adama held his eyes. I wanted to see home as it truly is. She meant it one way. He heard it another. The brief shadow that crossed his face told her so. Before either could say more, Mama Kemi clapped her hands together. Enough standing in the sun. Halima, bring juice. Tunda, take your sister's things to the good room. The good room. Adama noticed at once that Baba Sani did not react. Not surprise, not pleasure, not even habit. Just silence. That told her everything. Inside the house smelled of fried onions, furniture polish, and concealment. The front sitting room had been upgraded, newer sofa covers framed prints on the walls, a television larger than any the family had ever owned in her youth, a polished cabinet filled with decorative bowls no one in that household had once cared about. The transformation was not luxurious enough to expose the theft instantly, but it was more than comfort. It was performance. Beautiful, Adama said. Mama Kemi beamed. We did what we could. God has been kind. Adama glanced at Baba Sani. He remained near the doorway, almost like a visitor in his own home. Yes, Adama said. God has been watching. Halima returned with a tray of juice glasses. She moved carefully, eyes lowered, but when she handed Adama a glass, their fingers brushed. The girl's hand was cold. Welcome home, Halima whispered. It was the only voice in the room that sounded real. The performance continued through the afternoon. Mama Kemi narrated the house's small improvements with the pride of a woman displaying the fruit of hard years, the patched roof, the updated chairs, the generator contribution, the water tank, the school expenses, the cost of living, the burden of running a household while managing your stubborn father. Tunda added jokes and stories intended to make him appear indispensable. Halima spoke rarely. Baba Sani barely spoke at all. Adama listened and placed each lie exactly where it belonged, not because the words were outrageous, but because she now knew too much. Every mention of sacrifice tasted stolen. Every mention of we sat on the shoulders of one exhausted man who did not contradict them. When evening came, Mama Kemi insisted on a family dinner to celebrate Adama's return. Neighbors were not invited. No one outside the gate needed to hear what was said inside. The dining table was fuller than Adama expected. Jollof rice, stew, fried plantain, grilled fish, fresh bread, mineral drinks lined up like little glass witnesses. A feast by local standards. Certainly not the table of a household supposedly balanced on the edge of starvation. Tunda took the seat at the head of the table before catching himself and shifting with a laugh toward the side. Baba Sani sat not opposite Mama Kemi, where the father of the house once would have, but near the far corner. Another detail. Another theft. Adama let the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone slightly uncomfortable before she smiled and began. "I've missed this," she said. "Eating together." Mama Kemi nodded with practiced sadness. Family is everything. Adama almost admired the shamelessness of it. For the first part of the meal, she played her role beautifully. She asked about neighbors, about prices in the market, about church changes, about the roadworks that had still not been completed. Tunda bragged about his small trading activities. Mama Kemi described the stress of managing the home. Halima kept her eyes mostly on her plate. Babasani ate slowly and little. Then Adama turned the conversation. "And Baba's health?" she asked lightly, spoon poised above her plate. "I heard he has been unwell." Mama Kemi answered too quickly. "Oh, much better now. Better from what just age you know. A little weakness. Nothing serious." Adama tilted her head. "I thought there had been hospital treatment." There it was, the first crack. Mama Kemi's fingers tightened around her spoon. Tunda reached for his drink, though his glass was already in hand. "Yes," Mama Kemi said. "Last year." "Which hospital?" A pause. "The one near the main road." Adama smiled softly. "There are 3 near the main road." Mama Kemi laughed, brittle and small. "You know how these things are. We were so worried at the time, so worried you forgot where no one spoke." Then Baba Sani said quietly, "Adama, a warning. Or perhaps a plea." She turned toward him with gentleness. "I'm only asking because I care." Mama Kemi recovered first. It was St. Mary's. Adama took a sip of water, then set the glass down with perfect calm. "Interesting," she said, "because St. Mary's stopped inpatient care 2 years before last year. Their records are public." Tunde's chair scraped lightly against the floor. Mama Kemi's smile vanished. The room changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but the air lost its softness. It became a place where everyone could suddenly feel the edges of one another. "You checked records?" Tunde asked. "I work in corporate logistics," Adama said. "Checking records is how I stay alive." Babasani's eyes lifted sharply to hers. Mama Kemi forced a laugh that was now fully dead. "My dear, in this house we don't speak like investigators over food." "In this house," Adama replied, still smiling. "What do we speak like?" No answer came. Halima's spoon slipped from her hand and hit the plate with a small metallic sound that seemed louder than it should have. The girl flinched as if she expected punishment for making noise. Adama saw it. Babasani saw it. Mama Kemi saw that they saw it. So Mama Kemi rose at once. "Enough of this. We are tired, all of us. Adama has traveled. Tunda clear the drinks. Halima bring fruit." The dinner did not recover. Conversation resumed in fragments carefully false and ended early. Later that night, after the house had gone, still, Adama left the guest room without switching on the corridor light. She moved in silence. She had practiced since childhood, avoiding the loose floorboard near the kitchen, the latch that clicked too sharply if lifted straight up the back door that dragged slightly on the bottom hinge. Some maps never fully leave the body. Moonlight silvered the yard. Crickets hissed in the weeds. Somewhere beyond the walls a radio played, low and distant. Adama crossed to the rear of the house. The storage room door was not fully shut. Inside, Babasani was asleep on the narrow cot, one arm over his eyes, still wearing yesterday's exhaustion, like another blanket. A small battery lamp glowed on the stool beside him. His medicine lay unopened. Adama stood at the threshold and let the truth settle without interruption. Her father did not merely spend time here. He lived here, in the back, in the heat, in the room where broken tools and sacks had once been kept, while the front of the house shone for visitors. Then she noticed something else. Against the inside wall, beside an old grain bin and half hidden by folded tarpaulin, sat a dented metal box. Not large, not special. Exactly the kind of box no one would value enough to search thoroughly unless they already knew it mattered. Her pulse changed. The unfinished letter flashed in her mind. Under the metal box in the old grain room. Babasani stirred in his sleep, and Adama stepped back at once. Not tonight. Not while waking him might endanger whatever he had hidden. She retreated into the shadows just as a new movement caught her eye. Halima. The girl stood near the kitchen door, barefoot, watching the storage room with tears shining on her face in the moonlight. She had not seen Adama yet. She was looking only at Babasani's door with the stricken helplessness of someone who loved a person she was too afraid to defend aloud. Then, as if sensing another presence, Halima turned. Her gaze locked with Adama's across the yard. Neither spoke. But in that silent exchange, Adama understood something crucial. Halima was not merely frightened. She knew. And whatever she knew was large enough to keep her awake at night, weeping in secret while the rest of the house slept behind its stolen comfort. Halima fled before Adama could speak to her, not with the guilty speed of someone caught spying, but with the panicked retreat of a person who had learned that being seen at the wrong moment could cost more than tears. 1 second she stood in the wash of moonlight, small and stricken, and the next she had vanished behind the kitchen wall like a frightened bird slipping into reeds. Adama remained still for several breaths. The yard had gone silent again, except for the insects and the distant growl of a generator from another house. Behind the half-closed storage room door, Babasani shifted once on the narrow cot, and then sank back into exhausted sleep. The metal box sat where it was dull and ordinary, and suddenly heavier with meaning than any safe in any executive office Adama had ever opened. She did not touch it. Not because she lacked courage, but because instinct sharp, now disciplined by everything she had seen, told her the next step could not be taken blindly. If the box contained documents, she needed to know what game had produced them. If someone noticed it had been searched, Mama Kemi and Tunda would move faster. Lies cornered by evidence often became vicious. So Adama returned to the guest room and waited for dawn with her anger folded into patience, like a blade inside cloth. The next morning she left the house after breakfast under the easy pretext of wanting to visit old places and see how the town had changed. Mama Kemi encouraged it with suspicious enthusiasm. Tunda even offered to accompany her until Adama declined, with a smile so polished it could not be challenged. Babasani said little, but his eyes followed her to the gate. She knew he had heard the shift at dinner. She knew he had understood that something in her had seen through the painted version of this household. Yet he still said nothing, still protected them with silence. That silence would not hold much longer. The office of Kwame Bako stood above a stationery shop near the municipal court, a faded building with peeling cream paint barred windows and the kind of staircase that announced every visitor with a complaining groan. Adama had found the name in her old contact archives. Years ago, when her mother was still alive, Kwame Bako had handled minor papers for Babasani's small trading business. A land lease, a supplier dispute, a contract for storage space near the market. If anyone old enough, local enough, and stubborn enough still knew the family's paper trail, it would be him. His receptionist was a woman with silver-threaded braids and an expression that suggested nonsense had to queue like everyone else. She looked Adama over assessed quality without warmth and asked, "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Adama said. "But tell Mr. Bako that Adama Diallo is here from Nairobi. Tell him it concerns Babasani." The woman's expression changed very slightly. She disappeared behind the inner door and returned less than a minute later. "He says come in." Kwame Bako had grown old in the particular way of men who spend their lives among paper dry-skinned, sharp-eyed, and somehow more exact as the body thinned. He sat behind a metal desk buried under files and looked at Adama over his glasses without rising. So he said, "The daughter has finally come home." There was no malice in it, only age truth and the right not to decorate either. Adama closed the door behind her. "You expected me sooner. I expected many things in this town," he said. Most of them disappointed me. He gestured to the chair opposite him. She sat. For a few moments, neither spoke. He let her absorb the room shelves of bundled deeds, date stamps, tin boxes, certificate folders, a wall calendar 2 months out of date, and a framed photograph of a younger Kwame shaking hands with a local minister who looked long dead. Finally he said, "Tell me what you know. It will save time." Adama laid it out cleanly. The market, the storage room, the intercepted letters, the inconsistent hospital story, the property applications with irregular signatures. She did not dramatize. She did not soften. By the time she finished, Kwame Bako had removed his glasses and was rubbing the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers. "When did it begin?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "It began," he said, "when gratitude became a chain around your father's neck." Adama leaned forward. Kwame opened a side drawer and took out a paper folder worn pale at the edges. He untied the cloth tape around it and spread several copies across the desk. "After your mother died, he said your father nearly collapsed. Not financially, all at once, but in structure. He was a man who functioned through devotion. When the center of that devotion was removed, he became vulnerable in ways he himself did not fully understand." Adama kept her face still, though the mention of her mother landed deep. "Kemi entered his life during that period," Kwame continued. "You were already abroad by then, just beginning to build your career. Your father's small business, grain storage and transport, had suffered from a bad season, delayed payments, and 1 transport theft. Kemi helped him. Or seemed to. How? She had relatives with credit access. She introduced him to 2 short-term lenders. One of them was legitimate. The other—" he lifted a shoulder. "Less so. She also managed household accounts for a while, kept receipts, negotiated some supplier payments. She presented herself as practical, where grief had made your father soft." Adama's jaw tightened. So he trusted her. He did more than trust her. He felt indebted to her. That word again. Debt. Gratitude. Obligation. The currency of decent men trapped by manipulative ones. Kwame tapped the papers. "Your father married Kemi not because passion carried him away, not because loneliness alone demanded it. He married her because he believed she had steadied the house when the roof was sliding. He thought formalizing her place was a moral act." Adama stared at the copies without seeing them. "He loved my mother," she said quietly. Kwame nodded. He did. That was never in doubt. Which is partly why he was easy to exploit afterward. Men who love faithfully often do not imagine faithlessness early enough. The words sat between them like a verdict. Adama forced herself back to the documents. "What are these?" "An old business restructuring note, a household expense declaration, a co-sign authority draft. Nothing criminal by itself. But look here." He pointed to a sequence of signatures across different years. "The first signature from Kemi is neat, almost deferential. The later ones are larger, bolder, more possessive. See the progression. That is not law speaking. That is character announcing itself." Adama traced the page with her eyes. He was right. The transformation was there not in content, but in confidence. "When did she turn?" Adama asked. Kwame gave a humorless smile. "People like Kemi do not turn. They reveal in stages." He opened another file and slid out a photocopy of a school record form. "Do you know why your father tolerated more than pride should have allowed? I know it involves Halima." That made him look at her sharply. "So you are already finding the true seams." He folded his hands. "Halima is not Kemi's by blood." Adama blinked. What Kemi had a son from her first union, Tunda. Everyone knows that. But few know about the girl. Halima was born to Kemi's younger cousin, a girl who died within days of childbirth. The father vanished before the burial dust settled. Kemi took the baby in only because your father insisted no child would be thrown into uncertainty if there was room in his house. Adama went cold. Your father brought Halima under his roof? She asked. Yes. Fed her, clothed her, named her before church paid her school fees when he still could. Kemi accepted because it made her look generous and because your father was still useful. But usefulness changes shape when money arrives from afar. Adama thought of Halima's cold hand at dinner, her silence, her tears in the yard. She's not loved, Adama said. No, Kwame replied. She is tolerated when convenient, blamed when not. Your father knows it. He pushed his glasses back on and looked directly at her. That is your first real truth, Adama. Kemi did not merely betray your father's trust. She learned to use his goodness against him. The room felt smaller. So he stayed quiet, Adama said slowly, because speaking openly might put Halima at risk. Kwame nodded once. Among other things. Other things, there is more. He rose with effort and crossed to a steel cabinet in the corner. From the bottom drawer he removed a sealed envelope and brought it back. He did not hand it to her immediately. I kept this because I suspected the day would come when silence became more dangerous than discretion, he said. Your father came to me 18 months ago. He wanted advice on contesting a household authority filing Kemi had pressured him to sign. He was ashamed, not of being deceived, mind you, of having allowed deception to settle in his own house. Adama could almost hear Baba Sani saying it. He refused to pursue open legal action. Kwame continued. Do you know why? Because of Halima. Partly, but also because Tundi threatened to take the matter public in a way that would, in your father's view, destroy what little remained of family dignity. He said neighbors would laugh, church people would gossip, market men would say he could not control his household. Foolish reasons. His mouth hardened. But pride and shame have buried many good men before the grave did. He finally placed the envelope on the desk. Inside were copies of statements, handwritten notes, and one document that made Adama's stomach drop, a draft declaration by Baba Sani naming himself temporary guardian and educational sponsor of Halima should domestic stability deteriorate. Domestic stability deteriorate. Not if he died. If the house broke apart. He was preparing. Adama whispered. Yes, Kwame said. Quietly. Poorly. But yes. Then he gave her the second real blow. Your father knew Kemi was taking money long before the property filings began. Adama looked up sharply. Then why? Because he thought he could absorb it. Kwame's voice rose for the first time, not with anger at her, but with fury long delayed. That is what men like him do. First they absorb insult, then expense, then displacement, then humiliation, each time telling themselves the next compromise will preserve peace. But peace bought with self-erasure is only a slower kind of violence. Adama sat very still. Kwame leaned back. He told me once, if it were only me I would leave, but the girl would pay first. The girl. Not Halima. The girl. The way the innocent becomes singular in the minds of people trying to shield them. Adama's anger changed shape then. Until now it had been directed cleanly outward, at Mama Kemi at Tunda, at the theft, the lies, the performance. But now it deepened into something more terrible because it met the size of her father's sacrifice. He had not stayed because he was weak. He had stayed because he chose to stand between cruelty and a child. Kwame watched the realization hit her and did not interrupt it. After a long silence, Adama asked, "Why didn't you contact me? I tried once through an old address." No reply. After that, your father forbade it. Why, he said, if he could not speak to you as a father with dignity, he would not summon you as a victim of his failure. Adama's eyes burned. Failure. The word was obscene. He never failed, she said. Kwame's expression softened by a fraction. No. But noble men often judge themselves by the suffering they could not prevent. He closed the folder and tied the tape again. Now you know enough to stop mistaking this for ordinary greed. Kemi's betrayal is deep, yes. Tunde's appetite is worse. But the center of the matter is this: your father has been bartering his own dignity to keep one vulnerable child from being discarded. That is the truth beneath all the other truths. Adama rose slowly, taking the envelope and copies with careful hands. And if I move against them, she asked. Kwame met her gaze without blinking. Then move completely. Half measures will only teach them to hide faster. At the door, she paused. One more thing, she said. If I bring this into daylight, will my father stand with me? Kwame's answer came like iron laid on wood. He will resist you first. Adama turned. Because exposing evil will feel to him like exposing family. Because he has spent too long confusing endurance with duty. Because love made him patient past wisdom. Kwame held her eyes. But when the moment comes, if you force truth into the open cleanly enough, he will stand where his conscience has always been waiting. Adama nodded once. When she stepped back out into the heat and noise of the town, the world looked the same as before. Crowded roads, minibus horns, hawkers, court clerks, dust rising under feet. But inside her the architecture had changed. Now she knew the first great betrayal, and now she knew the deeper holiness beneath it. Mama Kemi had not merely stolen from Baba Sani. She had taken shelter in a good man's gratitude, then fed on his silence while he suffered to protect a child she herself would never have protected. That truth did not soften Adama's resolve. It made it sacred. Adama did not go straight back to the house after leaving Kwame Bako's office. She needed movement before she could trust her own voice. So Isa drove without questions while the town passed in fragments outside the window. Schoolchildren in blue uniforms, women balancing baskets on their heads, a goat tied beside a barber shop, a half-finished church wall painted with hopeful scripture. Ordinary life. Small routines, honest fatigue. All of it seemed almost unbearable after what she had just learned. Baba Sani had not allowed himself to be crushed because he lacked courage. He had chosen humiliation over abandonment. He had stood in the path of a cruel woman for years because a girl under his roof had no one else strong enough or decent enough to stand there. The realization changed everything. Until now, Adama had seen Halima as a frightened witness, a silent girl, a possible key. Now she understood that Halima was also the center of the moral wound. Not the cause of it, never that, but the vulnerable life around which all the hidden choices had formed. Baba Sani's silence, Mama Kemi's manipulation, Tunde's arrogance, even the false harmony in that house had been built on one unspoken truth. A child had survived only because one man refused to stop being human. Madame Isa said carefully from the front seat. "Do you want to return now?" Adama looked out at the road. "No." "Where to?" She thought for a moment. The school near the old mission road. The girls' secondary. Isa nodded and turned the wheel. If Kwame was right, and every instinct in Adama now told her he was, then Halima's life would leave traces somewhere beyond that house. School records, attendance patterns, fee delays, teachers who noticed more than families believed. Children carried their pain badly. Adults only pretended not to see it. The school compound was larger than Adama remembered from her own childhood visits to neighboring events. New cement blocks had been added, but the older buildings still stood under jacaranda shade, their walls pale with dust and heat. Lessons had ended for the day, yet a few students remained near the gate, waiting for rides or walking home in pairs. Adama did not go in as herself. She had become almost instinctively strategic now. She introduced herself at the office as a returning alumna sponsor interested in scholarship outreach for vulnerable girls in the district. The school secretary, already warming to the prospect of donor money, directed her to the vice principal, a stern woman named Sister Beatrice, whose eyes missed almost nothing. Within 10 minutes, Adama had Halima's school file in front of her. She did not need to read long before the shape of the girl's life rose from the page. Good marks. Irregular attendance spikes. Fee arrears settled unpredictably. 2 changes in uniform measurements over 3 years, suggesting weight fluctuation. Notes from teachers quiet but capable. Withdrawn during group activity. Protective of younger students arrived without lunch 3 times. This term shows signs of anxiety during parental visits. Parental visits. Adama looked up. Who usually comes for her sister? Beatrice folded her hands on the desk. Not the mother, if that is what you are asking. The answer came too quickly to be casual. Then who? The nun studied Adama for a moment. You are connected to the family. It was not phrased as a question. Yes, Adama said. Closely, yes. Then I will speak plainly. Adama nodded. Your father comes, Sister Beatrice said. Or tries to. When fees are behind, he comes. When the girl is unwell, he comes. When she wins anything small, he comes. And when he cannot come, she changes. She becomes distracted, watchful, like a child listening for weather inside walls. Adama held the edge of the desk. And the others, a pause. The boy came, once Sister Beatrice said. He spoke to the bursar as if the school were cheating him. He left without greeting the girl. The woman came only when there was a public donor event and photographs were being taken. There it was again. Performance. Adama forced herself to ask the next question evenly. Does Halima know she is not Mama Kemi's daughter? Sister Beatrice's expression changed very slightly. She knows enough to hurt, she said. I do not know what words have been used inside that house, but children do not require legal language to understand conditional love. The words landed with brutal precision. Adama thanked her, promised nothing she could not yet deliver, and left with a copy of Halima's bursary summary, and a pain lodged so deeply in her chest she could feel it when she breathed. By the time she returned to the house, dusk had begun to thicken around the compound walls. The front yard looked calm. Too calm. Mama Kemi sat on the veranda sorting green beans into a bowl as if she had been born to modest virtue. Tunda was on his phone legs spread wide, laughing at something on the screen. Baba Sani was nowhere visible. Halima was kneeling near the basin washing dishes. Adama stepped through the gate and felt the house register her mood before she spoke. Some rooms have that instinct. Guilty spaces are especially sensitive to shifts in weather. You were out long, Mama Kemi said, not looking up. I had things to see, Adama replied. Tunda glanced at her. Big people always have mysterious things. Adama set her bag down beside the doorway, and small men always talk too loudly. Tunda's laugh died. Mama Kemi looked up at once, assessing. Measuring. Adjusting her face into maternal concern. Adama, if something is troubling you? Yes, Adama said. The word cut across the yard so cleanly that even Halima's hands stilled in the water. Mama Kemi's smile thinned. What is troubling you? Adama looked directly at Halima. The truth, she said. No one moved. Then Baba Sani appeared from the side passage carrying a coil of rope. He stopped at once, eyes moving from one face to another. Adama took a breath. This was not the full confrontation. She knew that. She had not yet gathered the documents from behind the kitchen wall or beneath the metal box. She had not laid her trap. But one thing could no longer be delayed. Halima. The girl had been living inside a house where every lie depended on her continued silence and fear. Adama could not keep treating her like a piece of evidence, so she turned fully toward her. "How old were you?" Adama asked softly. "When Babasani first began paying your school fees?" "Mama." Kemi went rigid. Tunde shot to his feet. "What kind of question is that?" Halima stared at Adama as if the ground beneath her had opened. Babasani spoke at last, sharp and low. "Adama." But Adama did not stop. "How old were you?" she repeated, still looking only at Halima, "when you learned the man who protected you was the only real parent you had in that house?" The bowl slipped from Halima's lap and hit the ground with a wet crack. Plates tilted. Water spread across the dirt. Mama Kemi stood so quickly her chair fell backward. "Enough," she snapped. "You come into this house after years away and think you can poison children against their mother." Halima flinched at the word mother. Adama saw it. So did Babasani. And in that tiny involuntary reaction, another piece of the truth stood up in full daylight. Tunde rounded on Halima first, not Adama. "Open your mouth and deny it," he barked. "Tell her Mama raised you. Tell her." Halima's lips parted, but no sound came. Babasani dropped the rope. The slap of it against the ground startled everyone. "Leave the girl alone," he said. His voice was not loud, but for the first time since Adama had returned, it carried command. Tunde hesitated. Mama Kemi recovered faster. "She is my responsibility," she said coldly. "Do not turn this house upside down because Adama comes back with foreign arrogance and stories from outsiders." Adama's anger rose so fast she felt her pulse in her throat. "Stories, yes, stories." Mama Kemi spat. "People talk, neighbors invent, they envy. They see a family standing and want to crack it open." "Standing," Adama repeated. "Is that what you call a man sleeping in a storage room?" The silence that followed was absolute. Halima began to cry without making a sound. Tunde looked toward Babasani, and that glance told Adama more than any confession. Not fear of exposure, fear of losing control of the one person they had assumed would never resist. Mama Kemi took a step forward. "Your father chose." "No," Adama said. One word, flat. "Final." He chose sacrifice. "You turned it into habit." Mama Kemi's face changed then. The mask didn't simply crack. It slipped. For 1 second, the naked resentment beneath it showed plainly resentment toward Adama's success, toward Babasani's stubborn decency, toward Halima's mere existence as a drain on resources she believed should have belonged elsewhere. And Halima saw it. That, more than anything, shattered the girl. She backed away from the basin, tears shaking down her face. "I tried," she whispered. "I tried not to cost anything. I tried not to make trouble. I tried." Babasani crossed the yard in 2 strides that looked painful and gathered her to him. "Enough," he said, but now the word was for comfort, not command. "You owe no one your apology." Halima broke, then fully helplessly sobbing into the chest of the man who had been dragging sacks through the market to keep her fed, schooled, and sheltered. Adama turned her face away for one moment, because the sight was too much, too pure, too terrible. When she looked back, Babasani had his hand over the back of Halima's head, and his eyes were on Adama. There was pain in them, and warning, and gratitude, and fear. He knew now that she knew. Not just the surface humiliation, not just the missing money. The deeper thing, the sacred wound beneath the fraud. Mama Kemi understood that too. That was why her next words came not defensive, but vicious. "If you take her side," she said to Babasani, voice shaking with rage, "do not expect this house to remain open to either of you." The threat hung there, at Halima, at him, at the exact arrangement of fear Kwame had described. Adama felt something inside her go still, not colder, clearer. So this was the line. This was the weapon. Home itself. Shelter. Legitimacy. The right to remain. And in threatening it openly, Mama Kemi had done something priceless. She had revealed before witnesses the cruelty Baba Sani had been shielding Halima from all along. No document could have spoken more clearly. Baba Sani's arms tightened around the girl. He looked older than he had in the market. And stronger. Adama understood in that moment what Kwame had meant. Her father would resist truth first. But his conscience had already begun to stand up. No one slept well after that. The house did not explode into shouting. That would have been easier. Instead, it settled into a strained, dangerous quiet, the kind that makes every plate set down too hard sound like a confession, and every closed door feel like strategy. Adama lay awake in the guest room listening to the building breathe. A pipe knocked once in the wall. Footsteps crossed the corridor after midnight light careful, probably Halima. Later came heavier ones that paused outside Baba Sani's storage room and then moved away again. Tunde, she guessed. Checking, measuring, wondering how much had already slipped beyond their control. By dawn, Adama had made her decision. If she wanted to break Mama Kemi and Tunde cleanly, she needed more than anger, more than private knowledge, more than one trembling confrontation in a yard. She needed them to reveal themselves under the weight of temptation. Greed that survives accusation will often destroy itself when it smells opportunity. So she would offer opportunity. A false one. At breakfast she was calm again, too calm in fact, which made Mama Kemi visibly uneasy. Tunde overcompensated with loud jokes. Halima kept her eyes lowered. Baba Sani barely touched his tea. Adama waited until the meal was almost over before she set down her spoon and said with casual precision, "I may be able to bring business into this town." That got everyone's attention. Tunde leaned forward first. "Business, a small regional logistics expansion," Adama said. "Nothing announced yet. I'm still studying transport gaps in local produce markets. But if the pilot works, it could become permanent." Mama Kemi's gaze sharpened at once. "Permanent means jobs and contracts," Adama said. "Warehousing, loading supervision, vendor coordination, possibly a management office." Tunde's whole body changed. He tried to look thoughtful, but hunger lit his face before intelligence could hide it. "You should have told us sooner," he said. "We know this market. We know everyone." Adama turned her glass slowly between her fingers. "Do you?" Mama Kemi stepped in smoothly the way manipulators do when greed might make their allies sound stupid. "Family should help family," she said warmly. "If you are considering a serious investment here, you should not rely on outsiders. You have people in this house." Adama let a small silence bloom. "That depends what kind of people I have in this house." Again the air tightened. But this time, Mama Kemi did not fight the undertone. She pivoted around it. "You are right. Business is business. Everything must be proper, transparent." The irony was so thick, Adama almost laughed. "Yes," she said, "proper and transparent." She rose then, as if the topic were minor. "I'll be meeting a few potential local contacts over the next day or two. Nothing formal. Just quiet assessment." Tunde stood too quickly. "I can come with you." "No," Adama said pleasantly. "I prefer to watch people when they think they are unwatched." He sat back down. Only Baba Sani looked at her with full understanding. Not of the plan's details, perhaps, but of its direction. He knew she was no longer wandering through this house in confusion. She was building something. Whether that frightened him or steadied him, even he might not yet know. By noon, the bait had already begun to work. Adama left the house with Issa and spent the day moving visibly through the old quarter, not secretly now, but with the deliberate traceability of someone letting word spread. She visited a warehouse near the bus stand. She spent 20 minutes inspecting loading ramps at a grain depot. She had tea at the market with 2 transport brokers known for talking too much. She asked practical questions in a voice loud enough to be overheard. Delivery timing, spoilage risk, local labor, discipline, lease, reliability, security concerns. By evening, the rumor was moving exactly as she intended. A rich daughter had returned. She represented outside money. A project might be coming. Jobs, contracts, storage rights, and supply control could soon flow through one family gate. When she came home near sunset, she found Tunda in a pressed shirt and polished shoes, pretending he had not spent the last hour waiting for her. "I was just going out," he said. "Of course," Adama replied. Mama Kemi, meanwhile, had transformed herself into the image of dignified domestic competence. The veranda had been swept. Fresh fabric covered the chairs. Even the flower pots out front had been rearranged. She welcomed Adama with a smile whose sweetness had become almost medicinal in its falseness. "I have been thinking," she said as they sat. "If you truly want to help the community, this family can guide you better than anyone. Tunde understands the younger traders. I understand households. And your father?" She paused, perhaps remembering too late that invoking Baba Sani as useful now required more delicacy than before. "Your father knows the old market ways." Adama folded her hands. "Interesting." Mama Kemi leaned in. "A project like this needs trusted faces." "Trusted by whom?" Adama asked. "By people," Mama Kemi said, smile thinning. Adama nodded as if considering. "Then I suppose trust will need testing?" It was a small sentence, but it made Tunda glance up sharply. "Good. Let them hear the warning and still walk toward the trap." That was always more satisfying. That night, Adama made 3 calls. The first was to her regional operations director, a disciplined woman named Zuri Mensah, who owed Adama enough loyalty to act without demanding every explanation in advance. "I need you here tomorrow," Adama said. "Not as yourself at first. Come as an external consultant evaluating a small pilot. Bring letterhead, draft forms, evaluation sheets. Make it look real, because it will become real later." Zuri did not waste time on emotional questions. How formal. Formal enough to terrify amateurs. "Good," Zuri said. "I enjoy terrifying amateurs." The second call was to Kwame Bako. She asked him to be on standby for document review within 48 hours and to prepare certified registry requests if needed on short notice. His only reply was, "Have you found the hidden papers yet?" "Not yet." "Then do not confront ownership issues fully until you do." "I know." The third call was to the local market chairman's assistant, a man Adama had already met discreetly under business cover. She arranged a community consultation for 2 days later at the market's administrative hall. Traders' ward representatives, transport elders, and prospective local partners would be invited to hear about a possible supply chain investment. In other words, a stage. Not the final stage, but one large enough. The next morning, the performance accelerated. Tunda dressed early. Mama Kemi wore her best wrapper. They thought they were preparing to impress Adama. They were actually preparing to reveal themselves. Zuri arrived just before 10 in a company vehicle with temporary magnetic signage on the doors. She stepped out carrying a leather folder, a tablet, and the sort of face that made dishonest people immediately wish they had worn less perfume and told fewer lies. Tall, elegant, and unsmiling, she looked every inch the high-level evaluator. Adama introduced her with calm simplicity. "This is Ms. Zuri Mensah. She's reviewing local suitability for a trial logistics hub." Mama Kemi nearly glowed. Tunde extended his hand too eagerly. Zuri shook it once and moved on. "I'll need to see the available storage spaces linked to this household," Zuri said. Tunde was already talking. "We have access to the market. We know transport flows. My father has long-standing labor respect." Zuri turned to Baba Sani. "You are actively working the loading routes." Baba Sani hesitated. "Some." Tunde answered over him. "He assists when necessary. Adama saw the lie form and settle. Noted. Zuri made notes on her tablet. And current household-controlled infrastructure. Mama Kemi gestured toward the house with queenly pride. We maintain more than most in this area. With proper investment, this family can easily anchor operations. Anchor operations. The phrase would have been impressive if Adama had not personally seen Babasani sleeping beside broken sacks. Zuri asked to see the rear storage structures. Mama Kemi tried to redirect her toward the front room first, but Adama intervened lightly. No, let her see everything. Transparency. Remember. So they walked the yard. At the back, the reality became harder to decorate. The partial repairs, the cracked drain, the patched lean-to, the storage room, the grain space, the hidden ugliness that front-facing paint could not redeem. Zuri stopped outside Babasani's room. Who occupies this? Before Babasani could speak, Mama Kemi said, Temporary overflow. We are reorganizing. Adama watched Halima from the corner of her eye. The girl's face had gone white. Zuri made another note. Then they reached the old grain room. This was the moment Adama had been waiting for. The room smelled of dust burlap and damp cement. A half-broken shelf leaned against the far wall. A metal bin sat under the small window. And there, near the corner, partly tucked beneath old tarpaulin, was the dented metal box from Babasani's unfinished letter. Zuri glanced around clinically. Any legacy records stored here, lease copies, supplier, invoices, title, duplicates. Tunda laughed too quickly. Nothing useful, only old junk. Then open the box, Adama said. Everyone went still. Mama Kemi recovered first. Why, there is no need to dig through rubbish in front of a visitor. Because Adama said, turning to her serious business, never fears old paper. Tunde stepped toward the box, but not to open it. To move in front of it. This is ridiculous. Zuri's voice turned colder. If household documentation cannot be produced on request, eligibility decreases. That was all Greed needed. Of course it can be produced. Mama Kemi snapped, suddenly furious at the possibility of losing imagined advantage. Tunde, open it. He didn't move. Babasani, who had stayed silent through most of the inspection, looked from the box to Adama and back again. She saw the recognition in his face. Not full certainty, perhaps, but enough. He knew now that she had found the trail he'd tried to leave. Slowly, painfully, he stepped forward. I will open it, he said. No, Mama Kemi said sharply. The word came too fast. Everyone heard it. Zuri looked up from her tablet. Adama let the silence deepen around Mama Kemi's mistake until it became unbearable. Then Babasani knelt anyway. The effort clearly hurt him. Halima made a small, involuntary sound and took half a step forward before stopping herself. Tunda's jaw tightened. Mama Kemi's hands curled into fists at her sides. Babasani lifted the tarpaulin, dragged the box into clearer light and opened it. Inside were not only old receipts. There were envelopes, copies of transfer slips, notes in his handwriting, a folded registry acknowledgement, photocopies of letters, and beneath them all, wrapped in cloth, a second packet tied with string. Adama felt her pulse steady instead of race. This was what certainty felt like. Mama Kemi lunged, then, not gracefully, not strategically, just with the raw reflex of someone seeing control, physically, leave her reach. What nonsense is this? She demanded. Old scraps, is this what you embarrass us with? But the damage was done, because she had moved too fast, too defensively, too hungrily. And in front of a consultant, her daughter, her husband Halima, and the household itself, she had revealed the one truth she could no longer manage. She was afraid of what Babasani had hidden. Adama knelt beside the box and lifted the top envelope without yet opening it. There will be a community consultation at the market hall the day after tomorrow, she said calmly, still looking at the papers. Prospective local partners will be reviewed there. Tunda stared at her. What does that have to do with this? Adama rose, envelope in hand. Everything, she said. Because now the trap was complete. They believed the project was close enough to taste. They had already lied for position, claimed authority they did not have, and exposed their fear of documentary truth. All that remained was to let them walk onto a public stage where greed would make them speak too much, and evidence would make silence impossible. And as Adama looked at Baba Sani still kneeling beside the opened box, one hand braced against the floor, dignity and sorrow and exhausted courage. All visible at once, she knew the reckoning was no longer approaching. It had begun. The market hall had never looked so important. By 10 in the morning, every plastic chair was taken. Traders crowded the doorway. Porters leaned against the back wall. Women with ledger books sat beside men in transport jackets. 2 ward representatives had arrived in pressed shirts, eager to be associated with any development project that might become news. The market chairman stood near the front with the nervous pride of a man trying to look dignified inside a building that still smelled faintly of dust fish and sun-warmed cement. And at the center of it all, beneath a banner hastily hung for the occasion, sat a long table covered with white cloth. On one side, Adama, calm in a dark, tailored dress. Zuri with her tablet and clipped attention. Kwame Bako with a slim file case and reading glasses, and the market chairman, sweating but pleased. On the other side, at Adama's invitation, sat key local household stakeholders. Mama Kemi wore emerald green and enough gold-tone jewelry to suggest authority without quite achieving it. Tunde had chosen a blazer he thought made him look like management. Baba Sani sat at the far end in a freshly ironed shirt that did nothing to hide the fatigue in his face. Halima had not been formally seated at the table, but Adama had insisted she attend. The girl now sat in the front row beside Mama Nafi, hands clasped so tightly in her lap, the knuckles showed pale. The stage was set. It had taken all Adama's control to get here without detonating too soon. The contents of the metal box had given her what she needed, copies of transfer receipts that did not match the family's stories. 2 unsigned registry drafts. Baba Sani's handwritten notes about withheld calls, and most damaging of all, a folded sheet listing market earnings against household expenses in Baba Sani's own hand. The numbers were rough, but the truth inside them was unmistakable. He had been earning, paying, and disappearing under the weight of a house that publicly pretended to be carrying him. Yet even with all that, Adama had chosen not to go straight to police. Not yet. Because this story had not been built only on fraud. It had been built on narrative, on years of performance, on making Baba Sani look stubborn, small, and willingly poor while others arranged comfort around his labor. The lie had been social before it was legal. So the first collapse had to be social too. The market chairman cleared his throat into the microphone. It squealed, then settled. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "We are here to hear an exploratory proposal concerning a possible community logistics partnership that may bring employment, storage reform, and supply chain improvement to our market." Murmurs ran through the room. Tunde sat straighter. Mama Kemi folded her hands with serene ambition. Adama rose. She did not rush. She let the room quiet fully before she spoke. "My name," she said, "is Adama Diallo." That alone moved through the hall like a current. People in town had begun to hear it, yes. But names sound different when spoken by their owners into microphones. "I was born not far from this market." She continued. "I built my career away from here, and I returned with the intention of evaluating whether investment in this community could be done honestly." She paused on the last word. Honestly. The market knew how to hear weighted language. "For the past several days, Adama said, my team and I have spoken with traders, transporters, household representatives, and long-term community members. We have reviewed labor conditions, informal management claims, and storage feasibility. Normally this would be only a business process." She turned slightly toward Mama Kemi and Tunde. But in this case, business and truth cannot be separated. The hall shifted. Mama Kemi smiled tightly, as if mildly inconvenienced, but still in control. Tunde glanced once at her, then at Adama. Adama lifted one page from the file in front of her. Before I say anything else, I want to ask a simple question. Who in this room believes that Baba Sani Diallo has been living in comfort while his family managed household burdens on his behalf? There was confused silence. A few people looked toward Baba Sani. Others frowned. Mama Kemi answered first, her voice warm and practiced. No one said comfort, Adama. We all struggle in different ways. Do we, Adama asked. Mama Kemi opened her palms to the room. My husband is proud. He insists on working. We have begged him to rest. But he is stubborn, and in African homes we respect elders, even when they refuse ease. I have carried this household for years. The words were smooth. Too smooth. Some people nodded out of habit. Others looked uncertain. Tunde leaned toward the microphone. And I have supported him in the market whenever needed. We all contribute. That was when Adama began. She picked up the first document. This, she said, is a copy of one of the accounts to which I have sent money home for 8 years. It was represented to me as a family welfare account used for my father's care, household survival, and repairs. She placed it on the table in front of the market chairman, then lifted the second paper. This is a property alteration attempt naming household authority that did not legally exist. The third. This is a set of letters written by my father and never delivered to me. The fourth. This is his own written record of market earnings and household extraction. The room had gone very still. Tunde's face changed first. Not to guilt, to alarm. Mama Kemi's smile broke at one corner. Adama looked directly at the crowd now, not at the table. My father did not choose this arrangement as a hobby. He was not being cared for while choosing humble labor. He was carrying goods in this market to feed a family that had already been receiving my support for years. A murmur rose. Sharper this time. One of the transport men in the back muttered, I knew something was wrong. Another voice every morning he worked. Mama Kemi leaned into the microphone. Lies, half-truths. A daughter comes back with big city suspicion and wants to shame her own family in public. Adama turned to her. Then answer publicly. Mama Kemi's chin lifted. Gladly. Did you or did you not control the account receiving my transfers? A pause too long. It was a household account. Yes or no? Yes, Mama Kemi said. Did you tell me that my father's medical treatment required repeated emergency support? Yes, because... Name the hospital. The room moved again. Mama Kemi's eyes flashed. That detail is irrelevant. It is the most relevant detail in the room. No answer came. Adama did not let the silence die before she struck again. Did you or did you not allow Baba Sani to sleep in a back storage room while the front of the house was renovated? Gasps now. Real ones. Mama Kemi's voice sharpened. That room was temporary. Adama turned to the crowd. Temporary for how many years? She held up one of Baba Sani's letters. In this letter he refers to the room months before one of the hospital requests you sent me. In another he describes not being certain what still belongs to him in his own house. Now the murmurs became anger. Not everyone spoke, but the emotional center of the hall shifted. The market hated hypocrisy more than poverty. Poverty was ordinary. Hypocrisy that fed on a decent old man was not. Tunde grabbed his microphone. This is manipulation, he snapped. She is rich now and thinks paperwork means she understands life here. My father agreed to family decisions. Everything was discussed. Adama faced him fully. Did you take money from his hand at the gate? His mouth opened, then shut. Did you tell people in this town he was too stubborn to stop working? That was true. Did you present yourself to my consultant as a management anchor for a logistics project built on market knowledge? You did not earn. I know the market. You know how to spend what others carry. Laughter burst from somewhere in the back, sharp, ugly, approving. Tunde flushed dark. Mama Kemi stood abruptly. Enough. This is still a family matter. No, Adama said, rising too. It stopped being a private family matter when exploitation was carried out in public while lies were told in my name, in my father's name, and in front of this community. Then she turned to the one man whose voice mattered more than anyone's. Baba. The word landed differently here than in the house. In public. In truth, Baba Sani had been sitting very still, hands clasped so tightly the veins stood on them. He looked older than anyone in the room and more burdened than the building itself. For a moment Adama thought he might refuse. Kwame had warned her. He would resist first. And he did resist inside his face, inside the old training of dignity mistaken for silence. Then Halima made a sound. Not a sob, just a breath broken too sharply to hide. Baba Sani turned. He saw the girl in the front row, pale and trembling beside Mama Nafi. He saw her fear of what would happen if he said nothing. He saw perhaps all the years he had tried to spare her by absorbing the blows himself. When he looked back up, something had changed. Slowly he pushed back his chair and stood. The hall quieted so completely that the crackle of the old speaker wires could be heard overhead. His voice, when it came, was not strong in volume. It did not need to be. My daughter, he said, looking at Adama, speaks the truth. The words hit like a door blown open. Mama Kemi staggered back half a step. Tunde muttered. Baba But, Baba Sani raised one hand, and for the first time in years perhaps no one in that room spoke over him. I was ashamed, he said. Ashamed that my house had become a place where kindness could be turned into a chain. Ashamed that money sent in love became fuel for greed. Ashamed that I kept hoping patience would change what patience was feeding. His eyes moved to the crowd. I worked because mouths had to eat. I stayed silent because I feared what would happen to the girl in my home if I stopped standing between her and cruelty. Now people turned toward Halima. The girl shook as if the floor itself had betrayed her. Then, with a courage so raw it hurt to watch, she rose. Mama Kemi hissed, "Sit down!" Halima did not. Her voice was small, but the microphone in front of the first row caught enough of it. He protected me, she said, when no one else did. Silence. She swallowed hard. He paid my fees when there was no money. He told me I was not a burden. He gave me food and said he had already eaten when he had not. Her mouth trembled. He is the only reason I thought God still saw that house. No one breathed. Mama Kemi's face had gone rigid with fury beyond concealment. Ungrateful child. That was the final mistake, because she said it into the microphone. The whole room heard. Not daughter, not even girl. Child, ungrateful, as if protection was debt owed upward to abuse. A wave of disgust moved through the hall. One of the ward representatives leaned toward Kwame Bako and whispered something urgent. The market chairman sat frozen, staring at the table, as though hoping procedure might rescue him from morality. Tunde tried one last time. You are all exaggerating, he said desperately. This is emotional theater. Family tensions happen. Kwame Bako opened his file case at last. Forgery also happens, he said dryly, adjusting his glasses. And unlawful property alteration attempts. I have reviewed the preliminary papers. That changed the room again. Now this was not only shame, it was consequence. Adama stepped forward. I am placing a formal hold on any partnership involving false household claims, she said. I am also initiating immediate legal review of all property and transfer records connected to Baba Sani Diallo. From this moment, No one may speak in his name without challenge." Then she turned to Babasani. "You protected everyone you could," she said softly, though the microphone carried it. "But you do not have to protect those who built their comfort on your silence anymore." His face broke then, not into weakness, into release. Years of swallowed humiliation loosened in the lines around his mouth and eyes. He looked not destroyed, but emptied of a poison he had been forced to carry too long. Mama Kemi sank back into her chair. Tunda did not sit at all. He looked around the hall and saw, perhaps for the first time, that public charm meant nothing when public contempt arrived. And in that white-clothed market hall, before traders' elders' legal papers and the living memory of a community, the lie that had fed on Babasani for years collapsed under its own weight. Not quietly, not privately, but exactly where it had deserved to fall. The silence after the meeting did not feel empty. It felt cleansed, not peaceful yet. Peace takes longer than exposure, but stripped. The market hall, which had for one suspended hour held years of lies inside its hot concrete walls, now seemed to breathe differently. People rose slowly from their seats, not with the scattered confusion of an event ending, but with the grave attention of witnesses leaving a judgment. No one rushed to Mama Kemi. No one gathered around Tunda. The currents of sympathy had shifted entirely, and both of them knew it. Mama Kemi remained seated for several seconds after everyone else began moving her spine, rigid, her hands gripping the edge of the tablecloth hard enough to wrinkle it. The elegance she had worn like armor now looked theatrical, almost absurd. Without the protection of narrative, she was only a woman whose appetite had outrun her humanity. Tunda was the first to break. "This is not finished," he snapped, though the force in his voice sounded borrowed and already slipping. He looked at Adama, then at Kwame Bako, then at the ward representatives hovering in uneasy consultation near the side wall. "You cannot humiliate family and expect no answer." Kwame Bako closed his file case with a soft click. "Legal review is not humiliation, young man. It is merely what happens when lying grows paperwork." A few traders laughed under their breath. That laugh finished what public evidence had begun. Tunda's face darkened. He looked toward Babasani, perhaps expecting instinctive rescue, perhaps still unable to imagine a world in which the man he had used would stop cushioning his fall. But Babasani did not move toward him. He stood where he was, one hand resting lightly on the table, exhausted and upright. Halima stood close to his side now, not hiding behind him, but near enough that the choice was visible. Mama Nafi had moved behind the girl, like an old tree placing its shadow where it was needed most. Adama watched all of it and understood something essential. This was no longer a house divided only by theft. It was a house being morally sorted in real time. Mama Kemi rose at last. When she spoke, she did not sound ashamed. That would have required moral contact with what she had done. She sounded cornered. "So this is how it is," she said. "A man feeds a household for years and then turns on the very people who stayed with him." The sentence was so shameless that even the market chairman, who had spent most of the morning trying to remain neutral, stared at her openly. Babasani answered before Adama could. "No," he said quietly. "This is how it is. A man confuses endurance with duty, and people without gratitude call that permission." Mama Kemi flinched. The hall had already heard him speak truth once. Hearing him do it again directly without apology changed the air around him. He looked smaller in body than he had when Adama was young, but infinitely larger in spirit. Tunde scoffed harshly. "So now you are a victim?" Babasani turned to him fully. "No," he said. "I was a father." Nothing else in the room landed as hard as those 5 words, because everyone understood what he meant. He had worked. He had absorbed insult. He had accepted displacement. He had allowed his own dignity to be eaten away not because he was blind, but because he had thought sheltering others required it. He had mistaken self-destruction for sacrifice. And now that mistake was over. By afternoon, the first practical consequences had begun. Kwame Bako and the ward representatives moved quickly once public testimony had aligned with documentary irregularities. A temporary cautionary notice was filed against any pending alteration of the Diallo property until full verification could be completed. It was not a final legal victory yet, but it was enough to stop immediate transfer. That mattered. Adama also did something Mama Kemi had not expected. She did not send police to drag anyone away in handcuffs that day. She could have pushed for maximum spectacle. In another kind of story she might have. But this was not about revenge theatre. It was about restoring a moral center without staining Babasani further. Public collapse had already come. The next step needed to be structure. So instead, before the market chairman and 2 local witnesses, Adama stated 3 immediate measures. First, Babasani would no longer be financially represented by any household member other than himself or his legal delegate. Second, Halima's school fees, housing, health needs, and guardianship status would be placed under independent review and protection. Third, no business partnership storage arrangement or market-linked contract would involve Tunde or Mama Kemi while documentation remained in dispute. The effect on Mama Kemi was immediate. Not prison, not scandal headlines. Something worse for a person like her: exclusion. Loss of access, loss of control, loss of the ability to keep feeding on borrowed status. She stared at Adama with a hatred so naked it almost pitied itself. "You think money makes you righteous?" Adama met her gaze calmly. "No. But truth makes you visible." That ended it. Mama Kemi turned and walked out of the hall without another word, not with dignity, with the rigid speed of someone whose mind had already begun searching for a new version of events in which she remained blameless. Tunda followed several seconds later, but not before throwing one last furious look toward Halima. Babasani stepped between them without even seeming to think about it. Tunda stopped. Then he looked away first. Adama would remember that small moment for a long time, not because it was dramatic, but because it marked the end of a long arrangement. For years, everyone in that house had oriented themselves around Babasani's silence. Now they were colliding with his refusal. The days that followed were busy in the unglamorous way healing often is. There were papers to sign, statements, to copy land records, to retrieve registry appointments, to confirm school forms, to amend medicine, to review, and a doctor's examination that made Adama leave the clinic bathroom afterward and cry in private for 3 full minutes. Babasani's back was worse than he had admitted. There was strain inflammation and damage made heavier by years of untreated labor. His blood pressure was unstable, his nutrition had been poor, his sleep, according to the doctor, had likely been broken for a long time. When Adama heard all that guilt rose in her again like flood water, Babasani saw it. They were seated outside the clinic under a tin awning, while Isa went to collect prescriptions. Halima sat a little distance away with a bottle of water in both hands, giving them space without moving too far. Adama had been staring at the doctor's printed notes for nearly a minute, when Babasani said quietly, "Do not do that to yourself." She looked up. "Do what turn their sin into your punishment." The words undid her more than kindness would have. "I left," she said. "I sent money and called that love. I built a life so far away that I missed what was happening to you." "You built the life your mother wanted for you," he replied, "and you sent what you could with faith. The crime is not that you trusted. The crime is that trust was eaten." Adama pressed the papers together in her lap. "Why didn't you force your way through? Why didn't you come to me directly?" Babasani smiled then, but it was the old broken kind of smile, half pride and half sorrow. "Because I was foolish in a dignified way," he said. "That is still foolishness." She laughed once through tears. He looked out toward the road before speaking again. When your mother died, I thought my task was simple. Keep the house standing. Keep the children fed. Keep shame outside the gate. His hands clasped slowly over his cane. But a house can stand and still become a place of wrongness. I learned that late. Adama was silent. So hear me now, he said, turning back to her. You owe me no apology for becoming strong far away, but I owe you one for making silence look like wisdom. Her throat tightened too much to answer properly. She only reached for his hand. He let her take it. Across the small distance between them, Halima looked down quickly, as though witnessing tenderness still felt like witnessing something holy and private. Within 3 weeks, the shape of life changed. The property caution became a formal restoration process. Once hidden documentation from the box, the letters and registry inconsistencies were combined. Kwame Bako moved with quiet efficiency. Mama Kemi and Tunde tried first to intimidate, then to negotiate, then to portray themselves as misunderstood. None of it held. Too many people had heard too much. Too many papers now contradicted their improvisations. They were not destroyed in a theatrical sense. They were simply made to live with consequence. The front room they had curated as a public stage no longer belonged to their version of the story. Their names were removed from interim authority claims. Their influence at the market weakened. Their invitations thinned. People still greeted them in town because small places remained socially complicated, but deference was gone. The invisible credit they had enjoyed by standing on Baba Sani's bent back had vanished. Adama did not try to crush them beyond what justice required. That too surprised people. But she understood something. Many wounded people do not justice's strongest when it stops exactly where restoration begins. So she took Baba Sani home, but not back into the same arrangement. The house itself underwent honest repair this time. Not cosmetic fraud, but real reordering. The storage room was cleared, cleaned, and converted into a proper office archive for the market project. Baba Sani's old room was restored to him fully, with light ventilation and a bed chosen for his back. The cracked side wall was rebuilt. The hidden rot near the rear drain was removed entirely. No part of the home would remain designed around his diminishment. More importantly, Halima was given choice. That mattered most of all. Adama did not simply announce that the girl would come with her or remain with Baba Sani. She sat with her one evening beneath the neem tree in the yard and asked where she felt safe. Halima cried first, then apologized for crying, then cried harder when Adama told her she never had to apologize for tears in that conversation. In the end, the decision was simple. Halima wanted to stay near Baba Sani while finishing school, so Adama arranged it. Guardianship protections were formalized. School fees were paid forward. A private tutor was hired twice a week, and because healing also requires horizon, not just safety, Adama opened an education account in Halima's name and told her with deliberate steadiness, "Your future will not depend on who in a house decides you are worth feeding." Halima did not answer at first. Then she whispered, "I didn't know people could say things like that, and mean them." Adama had to look away for a moment. The market project became real. Not because Adama needed a symbolic gesture, but because the community genuinely needed better systems, and Baba Sani, freed now from exploitation, still possessed knowledge no consultant could invent. So the pilot hub opened modestly. Improved storage fair load, tracking documented vendor rotation, transparent transport allocation, and a small advisory board that included traders who had actually worked the market honestly for years. Baba Sani refused any grand title at first. He said titles made people lazy. Adama compromised by naming him Community Logistics Advisor and laughing when he grumbled at the formality. His true role was simpler. He became visible again. Men who had once watched him haul sacks in silence now came to ask his judgment. Younger porters listened when he spoke about fair count and honest weight. Women vendors greeted him not with pity, but with respect. Even the market chairman, suddenly eager to align himself with decency, began introducing him publicly as one of the elders who kept integrity alive when others were sleeping. Babasani always looked faintly embarrassed by such praise. But Adama noticed something else. His back did not bend in the same way anymore. Pain remained. Healing was not magic. Age did not reverse because truth had won. But humiliation had lifted, and the body seemed to know it. The final scene came on a quiet evening, nearly 2 months after the market hall reckoning. The renovated market was closing for the day. The light had gone golden and soft. Women were packing away tomatoes and greens. A boy chased a rolling orange beneath a stall. Somewhere nearby, someone was roasting maize. The new storage signage caught the last of the sun. Adama and Babasani sat side by side on a wooden bench overlooking the loading lane. For a while they said nothing. They did not need to. The silence between them was no longer arranged by fear. It was full of earned peace. At length, Babasani said, "Your mother would have liked this hour." Adama smiled. "Because it looks beautiful, because it tells the truth," he said. She turned toward him. He was older now than any version of him she had allowed herself to imagine while living abroad. The lines were deep. The hands were worn. The strength was quieter. But he looked like himself again. Not the erased man in the storage room. Not the bent figure in the market dust. Himself. "I thought coming home would mean giving you comfort," Adama said softly. He looked ahead at the closing market. "You gave me back witness." The sentence settled into her chest and stayed there. Nearby, Halima emerged from the new office, carrying a stack of exercise books, arguing gently with one of the younger clerks about inventory order. She caught sight of them and smiled, shy still, but real now. Not the fearful half-smile of a child asking permission to exist. Something steadier. Babasani followed Adama's gaze. "She laughs in the house now," he said. Adama's eyes stung. "I know." He nodded slowly. "Then the work was worth it." She almost protested. Almost said your suffering should never have been the price. But she stopped herself. He knew that now, and so did she. No healing comes from denying the cost once truth has already named it. Instead, she said, "We rebuild from here." Babasani leaned back against the bench and let out a long, quiet breath. "Yes," he said, "from here." And for the first time in many years, the words sounded less like survival than promise. Sometimes the deepest wounds in a family are not made by poverty, but by silence. This story reminds us that love can be twisted when good people endure too much without speaking, and that sacrifice without truth can become a prison instead of a blessing. Babasani did not suffer because he was weak. He suffered because he kept choosing others before himself, hoping kindness would one day soften hearts that had already surrendered to greed. And yet even in that pain, his humanity never died. He still protected the vulnerable. He still chose dignity. He still loved. That is the lesson we carry from this story. Real strength is not only the power to provide, but the courage to face the truth before injustice becomes normal. Family is not defined by who takes the most, speaks the loudest, or controls the house. Family is revealed by who protects, who stays honest, who refuses to let love become exploitation. And healing begins the moment truth is no longer hidden. Adama's return also teaches us something powerful. Sometimes coming home is not about restoring the past, but about rebuilding what should have existed all along. Justice matters. Accountability matters. But when truth opens the door, healing can finally enter behind it. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments what touched you most. Have you ever seen seen silence mistaken for strength or truth change a family forever. And if you love emotional, meaningful stories about justice, healing, and second chances, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more.